Hi, and welcome back to That's Entertainment, the weekly entertainment show where we look at all the interesting entertainment news from last week, this week. Let's start with some good news from exhibition. Marvel's Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Seven Rings, outperformed the industry expectations over its opening weekend. The film is also the second biggest pandemic opener in the US, beaten only by Marvel's latest movie, The Black Widow. Shang-Chi also did well overseas, where it took a further $56 million in over 41 territories. The UK was the leading international market, with its 7.7 million three-day opening weekend, the biggest of the summer. As Deadline Nancy Tartaglione pointed out, there is a fair amount of runaway ahead of Shang-Chi, which is looking at a potential 3.5 multiple overseas. Notably, not going this session were much of Southeast Asia and China, where a date is still awaited, and Australia, which is also still 70% closed. Of course, what remains to be seen is how well the film holds up over their second weekend and beyond. The current uncertainty around upcoming cinema releases makes those numbers more important than ever, as Variety reiterated. Unlike Black Widow, Shang-Chi was showing exclusively in theaters. Black Widow opted for a hybrid release and debuted on Disney+, where it is also to rent for $30 at the same time it opened in theaters, something that may have caused ticket sales to crater in subsequent weeks of release. The strong reception for Shang-Chi could impact the way Disney rolls out future superhero adventures during the COVID-19 pandemic. The studio has yet to make a decision about whether or not The Eternals, its next comic book epic, have an exclusive theatrical debut. But Variety's own analysis of the summer US box office results casts some doubt on the argument that Black Widow's simultaneous availability at home greatly impacted its second week of box office. While that film did drop 67.8% week on week, Fast and Furious 9 saw a similar 67.2% decline, and F9 was only showing in cinemas. The summer's first real box office hit, A Quiet Place 2, was also a cinema exclusive. Yet that too saw a significant 59.5% drop in weekend 2. Compare that to Disney's Jungle Cruise, another simultaneous theatrical and Disney Plus premiere release, which saw a similar 58.4% drop. So there is signal coming out of the market that the second week is causing a lot of films to tank despite the distribution strategy that's put in place. I think this is going to be something that we're going to have to follow with concern across the whole industry. The only certain takeaway from the summer's box office results was that everything underperformed, and this is surely the reason why Paramount made the decision to delay all of its remaining 2020 releases until next year. The studio highlighted some worrying trends that also led to their decision. According to the research conducted in the US by NRG, 67% of moviegoers say they are very or somewhat uncomfortable visiting their local cinema, which is down 11 points from July. Among family audiences, 58% of parents say they are very or somewhat comfortable taking their kids to the movies, which is down 5 points from the last week, and marks the lowest point since April of this year. Deadline also highlighted the continuing impact of COVID internationally. It is making it very difficult for studios to be confident that any film released in the coming months will be seen by enough cinema goers. Similarly, overseas, the comfort in attending a movie theatre and a positive outlook on the pandemic have declined from earlier this summer. Many markets have experienced big downturns over the past few months, including Australia, Mexico, Japan, and China. Most of Asia is still shut down or slow to return, and Japan and Korea continue to be more than half of their normal box office market. New Zealand, previously the safest place in the world in terms of pandemic, is now on strict lockdown due to the Delta variant, while Australia is still missing 50 to 60% of its pre-COVID theatrical footprint. Latin America, while it's seeing great slow growth, has major markets like Mexico and Brazil still 50% off from their pre-pandemic norms. Europe is more on track to making a robust comeback, but with the vaccine passport in effect, particularly in France, Germany, and Italy, theatrical recovery is slow, and Italy recently posted a 70% decline off its box office norm, while France and UK are down. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but you should check out what's happening in Paris now and other major cities around France, where diners are choosing to have picnics outside of restaurants in protest of the vaccine passport. I think that is an interesting way of protesting, certainly non-violent, but getting the message across. Sony were quick to move their release of Ghostbusters Afterlife back a week to November 19th, which will see the film get access to the IMAX and premium large format screens previously booked for Top Gun Maverick, but others are still questioning if the autumn releases will follow Tom Cruise to 2022, or instead open day and date theatrically and digitally, as we've seen with Black Widow. According to Variety, it's still possible that the major titles could see their release plans change yet again. Unless movie theaters witness a notable boost in attendance, insiders believe No Time to Die may have no choice but to move because veteran producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, who have unprecedented control over the venerable film franchise, are unlikely to allow the 007 adventure to debut simultaneously on streaming platforms. Keeping the 25th installment in the long-running British spy series in theaters, at least at a time when audiences expressed increased apprehension about going to the movies, remains risky because Bond entries are enormously expensive undertakings and need to generate hundreds of millions in hopes of breaking even. In other COVID-related news, Russell Crowe's Poker Face is the latest film forced to temporarily halt production after one of its crew received a confirmed corona diagnosis. The Australian production, which ironically was to originally have filmed in the US, was under a week from finishing filming. More worryingly for the studios is the revelation that Paramount has instigated a lawsuit against its insurers in the hope of claiming back money lost as a result of a 6+ pandemic-related delays to the production of Mission Impossible 7. So just what will be the long-term impact of COVID-19 on film production, theatrical distribution, and streaming? Well, according to industry veteran and former Ogilvy Mather Worldwide Director of Planning, Professor Jeannie Del Vecchio, we need to view the pandemic as a catalyst rather than a cause. After this disruption settles and the industry reaches a new equilibrium, studios and consumers will undoubtedly come out as winners. Talent will probably break even and theaters will lose. While some may think this was the result of the pandemic, these events were already in play because theatrical windows were already shrinking pre-COVID, and consumers were already revealing a strong preference for streaming, and studios were already creating their own streaming services. The pandemic simply made that future arrive earlier. Well, I disagree. I think that cinema is still an incredibly viable business model. It just has to change. And I think the viewership that the competition is between streaming platforms and cinemas is myopic, to say the least. Cinemas are an event. They're an outdoor event. You physically plan to go to the cinema. And therefore, I would say, in the words of Tim League, that cinemas are competing with other forms of outdoor entertainment. And I'm talking festivals, concerts, going to the bar, going to the restaurant. These are the things that the cinemas need to pitch themselves against. And the more that they can make that experience relevant to their consumers, the better chance they have at standing out. It's not just about the film. In fact, the film has always been the loss leader. The profit has been selling in concessions. And so if cinemas are to survive and thrive in the future, I'm far happier when I look at the business models employed by companies like Everyman or Picture House or Alamo Drafthouse, because they're the companies that have always focused on the experience. In fact, when I was at Step In the Locarno Film Festival, there was a discussion or panel that had various members of different organizations that work within the film business, and I talked at length with the team at Picture House and found out that they do an awful lot of planning when they look at the communities they go in. They actually take almost like a council-first approach, which I found very interesting. So the venues that they inherently end up buying or renting are already primed as being community centers. And humans are social animals. We need that experience of ecstasis, that ability to share emotion and connection amongst other groups of human beings. And cinema is one of the few areas that can be accomplished. Because remember, cinema performance on the box office night still drives all the film valuations for all downstream windows. And if we lock that data away purely within streaming platforms, the major studios aren't going to share that data because it's their proprietary data. It's their point of competition. So cinema is needed. It's still relevant, still important. It desperately needs to innovate. There are lots of things that can be done in the short term, and in my opinion, is here to stay.